Hi, in this video, I'm looking at converting radians to degrees or vice versa. So we're going to go both ways. So the degrees measurement is 360 degrees in a circle, and the radian measurement is 2 pi radius of the circle in a circle, so 2 pi radians in a circle. And we've looked at that in a previous video where we get the equivalent statement that pi radians is equivalent to 180 degrees. And this is our little magic formula, well, fact that we need to know for converting these. Well, we could use any equivalent statement. We could even use the fact that pi over 2 is equivalent to 90 degrees, say. But it's easier to use this because there's no fractions or other real numbers involved. So we typically use this as our helpful conversion. So if we look at an example, say, where I want to convert, let's have a look at 9 pi over 5, 9/5 of a pi in radians, and I want to know what is this in degrees. So I'm going to try and turn this into degrees. So basically, I've got 9/5 of a pi, and I want to know what is the equivalent degrees. And I'm just going to write that as theta for, theta degrees. So we can use our little equivalence because I know that 9/5 of a pi is equivalent to 1 pi is equivalent to 180. So 9/5 of a pi is obviously representing some fraction of pi, which means that this should be representing one fraction of 180. And what I can do is I can divide both sides by my little equivalence statement. So if on the left where I've got radians, I divide by the equivalent rate, I divide by radians. On the right where I've got degrees, I divide by degrees. So I'm not really breaking anything because I'm doing an unknown degrees divided by degrees, and these are equivalents. So pi is equal to 180. So I'm doing the same to both sides. I haven't broken anything. So we then look at what happens. Well, we've got 9/5 of a pi divided by pi, so they cancel. So that at least gives us 9/5 is equivalent to unknown on 180. And so now, if I want to solve this, I can just multiply by 180 up here. So that means that my degrees that this is equivalent to is 180 times by 9/5, or 9/5 of 180, which makes sense. If I've got 9/5 of a pi, and the pi represents 180 degrees, it means I'm going to have 9/5 of 180. And if we work that out, that means that our 9/5 of a pi is equivalent to 324 degrees. So that's it. Let's have a look at another one. So what if I wanted to have a look at, what if I just had 2.07 radians and I wanted to convert that to degrees? So I haven't really got a nice number of degrees here. Of radians here. Couldn't be turned into a nice fraction of pi. It's the same process. I know that 2.07 is equivalent to some sort of unknown angle. So if I divide by pi and divide by 180 degrees, then all I've got to do is that I'm going to have my 180 degrees multiplied by 2.07 over pi. And that's going to be how many degrees this angle of 2.07 radians is equivalent to. So that means that 2.07 radians is going to be equivalent to, and if we plug that little calculation to our calculator, we get 118.60 degrees with some rounding. So that's that way. Let's go the other way. So let's have a look. What happens if I have, for example, 240 degrees? I got 240 degrees, and I want to know what is that as a radian. Now, we could work out what is 240 out of 360, and that would give us a fraction of 2 pi. We know that 2 pi is the same, but let's just keep with our same trick we've been doing. I know that 240 degrees is equivalent to some unknown radians. I'm just going to use R for radians. And if I divide one side by the degrees, degrees divide degrees, and radians divided by radians, I've got this. And so that means I can have pi times by 240 over 180 will give me however many radians this is. So that means that 240 degrees is going to be equivalent to this fraction, 240 over 180. And if we work out 240 over 180, we work out it to be 4/3 of a pi. So we have 4 pi over 3. And finishing off with one last one, let's have a look. Fourth one, what if I want 135 degrees and I want to turn that into radians? So in this case, I've got 35, not 25, 135 degrees. I want to know what radians that's equivalent to. Divide degrees by degrees and radians by radians, and multiply that pi up. And that means that 135 degrees is going to be equivalent to pi times 135 and 180. Well, that's a fraction of 3/4, so we've got 3/4 of pi. And so that's it. To convert between radians and degrees, we just use this magic little equivalent statement that we've looked at and divide the radian side by the radians and the degrees side by the degrees and do whatever algebraic thing is required to isolate our unknown.